I'm Helena Arahuete. I grew up went to school in Argentina from kindergarten through university. I attended University of Buenos Aires. We have 3 years of history of art and architecture at the university. And in the last year had a whole chapter called Frank Lloyd Wright. And his apprentices were mentioned there, like Richard Neutra and John Lautner. When I arrived in the States with my husband, that was in 1971, end of 1971, and I started looking for work. It just happened that my father, who was a mechanical engineer, was doing some consulting work with another engineer who owned one of Lautner houses. So my father mentioned, oh, my daughter is coming and she's an architect. Oh, well, when she arrives, I have her call me and I'll give a phone number of this excellent architect I know. So I gave him a call. I heard John Lautner's name. I said, oh, wow, this is probably the same architect I had to study about back in Argentina. And he said, yes, of course, come on over. So I went to his office, and that was just maybe 3 weeks after I arrived. He started showing me sketches of a house in Acapulco. And he told me that he actually needed a designer or an architect who would be experienced in architectural concrete, exposed concrete, the metric system, and the Spanish language, because all the drawings had to be both in English and Spanish, because the structure engineers and, of course, the builders were in Mexico. So I qualified, in 3 accounts, and he hired me, right away. The following year, because I was used to changing jobs, I started looking around to see what other architects were doing, and there happened to be an exhibit, and I saw other architects' work, and I said, I'm in the very best place. This is the most creative architect I ever met. I stayed for 23 years. When I just started working for John Lautner, someone else was working on the Hope House. And construction started. It was conceived as a gigantic tent by Mr. Lautner that had to have the shape of a volcano to blend with the surrounding mountains. The idea was to finish the roof with the same type of gravel, so it would be basically camouflaged and not so visible. Because we needed natural light, he opened the center, as a crater. So for him, that was the crater of the volcano. Of course, the roof was so large because there was Bob Hope Golf tournament, and after the tournament, the Hopes would invite the participant, and they wanted that large open but covered terrace to sit 250 to 300 people for dinner. While the roof was under construction and all the plywood was on, a welder was welding steel structure at one of the ends. The welder was working for a company called Peter Keywood, a very large construction company. And Peter Keywood was a personal friend, apparently, of Mrs. Hope. She let go of the builder that only started it, because he was a small builder, even though he had built for Frank Lloyd Wright, and that was John Lautner's choice. So she hired this big company whose subcontractor, the welder, did not protect a large enough area. It was Palm Springs, the middle of the summer. I happened to be in the office when I received the call that the house is on fire. It was gone. All the wood in 15 minutes. And that night I saw Bob Hope on TV joking that the house burned down because the guards at the gate on Southridge Drive would not let the fire department through. Since the original fire happened so quickly, the existing steel structure, trusses mostly, were not damaged because the fire went so fast. So otherwise, the steel gets damaged as well. But it was all reused, and the materials that were used were all metal, corrugated metal for the roof, and metal studs, metal structure, everything. A lawsuit started against the construction company, and of course the subcontractor, and also the Hopes were suing their own lawyer because he had to take fire insurance during construction, and he didn't. He just procrastinated, and so there was no insurance. So this lawsuit lasted about 5 years. The man who was working on the original version of the house was gone by then. And after the Hopes won the lawsuit, Mrs. Hope, who was really the person in charge there of the house, wanted to build it like right away. So design and build, which was very stressful. And at that point, I had finished another job that for Lautner, and he assigned me to be the project architect of the Hope House. The original interior designer was Arthur Elrod, who was also a friend of Mrs. Hope, and she liked his house so much that she told him that she wanted to hire the same architect. That's how John Lautner got the job. But tragically, Arthur Elrod died in a car accident before, the construction continued. Mrs. Hope hired an interior designer friend who had done work for the sister of the then Shah of Iran. And her vision was all, golden mirrors, golden swans for the faucets, and paper, wallpaper. And she did not understand, the continuity that from inside to outside, so she wanted to change materials, and Mrs. Hope wanted a pink roof. She did not want the gravel on top. So the original roof was pink and terracotta. We called it terracotta. And a lot of the interiors, the living room in the second floor, which was very, very high, was to look like her living room in another house she had in Los Angeles. The interiors were all finished by Laura Mako, the interior designer friend, which I could never understand. How could Mrs. Hope like the Everett house, which was radically different from what the interior decorator did. Lautner got very frustrated with all those changes that were imposed, and I had to go there almost every week, every 2 weeks. Sometimes I would drive Mr. Lautner, with me, and it was stressful. We had like 14-hour-long meetings at the job site. Then she would invite him or me for lunch at her other house in Palm Springs and be the nicest person. And then we'd go back to the site and she would go like this to everybody. So people would hide and get scared of her. That was interesting. Both Bob Hope and Dolores Hope passed away, and the daughter decided to sell the house. So she called me and asked me to give a little talk to other real estate people at the house. It wasn't selling. Of course, they were asking $50 million. I learned that Ron Burkle was considering buying the house. And Burkle said that he really liked the Lautner architecture, but he would buy the house only if it could be done the way it was supposed to be done originally. I went to the site with Mr. Burkle, and I looked around, and he said he really wanted, not just the wallpaper removed, but to have it right. And I said, no problem. But there will be a lot of demolition because in the meantime, there were other structures that were added, that were changed completely. And he said, fine. I showed him drawings of what I would do, what I would recommend, to be demolished and what had to be redone. I explained everything to him, and he liked the ideas. So he bought the house for a much cheaper price. They found a very good general contractor for the house and good superintendent. At the same time, they found very good craftsmen, tradesmen to do the stonework and the wood finishes. So it was a pleasure working with them. And I went into, all the details because since, I know construction and I know what I want it to look. So I would go there quite often. I was quite well aware of what John Lautner would have done, plus the requirements of the new owner, and contrary to trying to find exactly the hardware and all the details that belong to the time of the original design, he would try to make it better and use the latest technology, but of course still keep the same grammar of the house. When I talk about it, good architecture, the space is like it has a soul, and you have to keep that, but otherwise you are free to change things around. So I felt totally free in changing whatever I thought had to be changed at the Hope House. because I saw him do that to his own projects.